Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. I am your host, Wendy Nystrom. Today's special guest is Adrian Hightower. He is the Sustainability and Resilience Manager with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Welcome to the show, Adrian.
Wendy, thank you for the invitation. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And you are a returning guest because other than the fact you are a delight, you are extremely knowledgeable in all things water.
I try to be, but we have a good team here at the Metropolitan Water District, so happy to answer any questions I can.
Absolutely. And you do have a good team. I had the pleasure of meeting a lot of your colleagues the other day, and I have to say an extraordinary group of people. But real quick, not everybody may know what the Metropolitan Water District is or does. Would you mind giving just a brief little background?
Yeah, we're probably the largest provider of water, potable water in the nation that you haven't heard of, which is good because that means we probably haven't made big mistakes. But we're a public agency and we're a regional wholesaler for water. So we bring the water in to Southern California and then sell it to whoever you pay your bills to is the short answer. We provide water to 19 million people, which is essentially half the population of California. And we do it in 6 counties. So if you live in Orange County, Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Riverside, San Diego, or Ventura, you're probably working with an agency that we work with to provide you clean drinking water.
Which is it's an amazing feat. I mean, it is a lot of water. A lot of people know about the Hoover Dam. That is one of the origin sources for the water that comes all the way over the mountains. And I just did a tour of all this, guys. It's a very complicated process how we get our water to Southern California. In addition to other sources that we get it from. So your background, what brought you to come to Metropolitan Water? You're a doctor. You and I met at the Envision training. You obviously are extremely knowledgeable.
My background is actually in energy, mostly renewable energy. That's where I did my graduate work, mostly on batteries and fuel cells, photovoltaics. I was a engineering and physics professor, and I used to take students to West and East Africa to do projects, mostly solar and battery projects. And then I learned water was more important than energy. We can talk about that. But that led me into learning about membrane filtration and materials for that. And that eventually led me to this work at the Metropolitan Water District, mostly on sustainability policy. So doctorate and professional engineer, really trying to turn the corner on sustainability here in our water industry.
That's I love how briefly you explained such an extraordinary career.
Yeah, anything longer puts people to sleep. So yeah, I'm pretty. And as a former professor, I was really good at putting people to sleep. So I'm kind of learning how to gauge that.
Hey, I studied geology. I get it.
Right.
So with Metropolitan Water District, a big issue is water affordability.
Yeah.
And I don't think everybody understands, just what that means.
Yeah. Because it's incredibly complex. To give you some context and why we're talking about this and how it relates to sustainability, because that's not obvious either. Metropolitan is undergoing a historic planning process, and we call it Climate Adaptation Master Plan for Water. So CAMP for Water. And this is different from our historic planning processes because this time is different. Climate change is upon us.
Yeah. And
it's frankly making traditional planning where you predict and plan a path to that predicted obsolete. That the uncertainties that we have associated with climate, even our financial situations, lead very reasonable people to have very different conclusions on what the future may bring. And so therefore, it's not easy just to plan for one particular future. And instead, you adopt some philosophies. Decision-making under deep uncertainty is one kind of framework, but they're all essentially looking at different scenarios, what could happen, planning for the best scenarios that you can, but prioritizing flexibility as you do that. And again, this is historic because the scale of investment is so large that we, over the past 70, 100 years, invested billions in our current infrastructure, which was designed for last century's climate. And we now need to spend billions to update that system for this century's climate. And so our general manager talks about spending $20 billion over 20 years just for our Southern California upgrades. And how we pay for that, which is not clear, and how that impacts our agencies that we serve and their communities that they serve, gets to the heart of water affordability. Because if we build something that's too expensive for people to use, it doesn't work. That system breaks down and in itself is not sustainable. So that's the intersection between water affordability and sustainability, and why we're talking about it so thoroughly these days.
Now you have a very interesting slide. May I pull that up?
Sure. Yeah.
So most people don't. This tells a very large story. Would you mind going into the details of what each one means, each paragraph?
Sure. To give you some context, Metropolitan Water District is made up of 38 board members. That's who governs, and they have board meetings and they have committee meetings. This particular slide comes from the Equity, Inclusion, and Affordability Committee, which for the past 8 months has been looking at water affordability very holistically, looking at not only what Metropolitan can do, but what our industry can do. And one of the key things that if you want to address household affordability, particularly to individuals in low-income communities, assistance programs are critical. And historically, there have not been many assistance programs either from the state or federal government for water. There are much more for energy and much more for food. But this is information from a study by Gregory Pierce in 2020, where essentially there's an order of magnitude difference that if you just look at energy, which is about $2 billion worth of investment, that water is actually 0.15 billion, so 150 million at the time.
Yeah.
So there's for something that is so important, and I told you that in my experience, water is more important than energy. And if you go to any natural disaster, you will find that out quite quickly.
And phone. There's a bar graph for phones.
That's right. Yeah. Communication is critical. I don't think we're critical about the assistance for phones, energy, food, even housing is up there. It's comparable to food, but what we're saying is what we need are assistance programs for water.
Yes.
And there were some assistance programs, as you can see, 150 million. And there were new programs created during COVID from the federal government that essentially ended in March of this year. And Senator Alex Padilla is proposing new legislation to fund those programs on a federal at the federal level. So this was one of the topics that we were discussing in the broad context of water affordability.
And I wasn't saying that communication is not important, just to clarify.
Right.
But I think that programs for water should be just as equitably distributed as everything else, because having clean, available water, and as you said, when you have a post-disaster, what's the one thing they tell you? Always make sure you fill up a bathtub with water, have water on hand, because you don't know if your pipes are. Water is extremely important, and that resiliency is extremely important. Not just for certain areas, but for everyone to have that equitable distribution, which is exactly what you had a whole bunch of panels and you've discussed this in depth.
We've had a series of 4 panels. We've had 19 experts ranging from member agencies, general managers from water districts, nonprofits, regulators, academics, and everybody chiming in, everybody having their perspective. Some broad conversations really came down to what is the role of Metropolitan as a wholesaler of water. Nobody ever really gets a direct bill from Metropolitan. We sell water to somebody who then gives you a bill. And if our role is, once or twice removed from that household, what is really the most effective way that we could support household affordability? One idea is that, our job is just to keep our rates as low as possible to enable those agencies to then provide water to their customers at a reasonable price. We should just keep it very narrowly focused. Other ideas are, we, as a wholesaler and as one of the largest providers of water, we can take advantages of economies of scale. And if we can identify programs that support our member agencies or those retail agencies, that's where we should put our efforts. So these types of debates are ongoing. And frankly, we're really grateful to our board for providing some direction at our meeting yesterday.
You have a remarkable board. I had the pleasure of watching that, and the interaction. I've attended many board meetings in my life, and many municipality meetings, and I have to say the interaction was extremely positive and collaborative and helpful. You know, everyone had something positive to enforce or to say, or a question. And that collaboration, I was personally surprised at how just genuine it was. And everyone is working towards this greater goal.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it was particularly notable because the topics that we're talking about are not obvious, certainly complex. You can approach it from different philosophies or ideologies or perspectives, but I think to your point, the collaboration came because folks were reasonable. We were talking about facts. We were talking about options and trade-offs. And if you keep it at those, that reality, if you ground it in that, you can come to some understandings or consensus, even if you don't necessarily agree.
Exactly. It is that collaboration and just compromising and talking to each other and working together, which, you know, we're not going to accomplish anything unless we learn to work together. And that's what I witnessed yesterday. I'm going to pull down the slide real quick just so you and I can talk again.
No problem.
But talking about these panels that you had and all of these experts you brought in and all of these plans that you have, anything we can look forward to in the near future of what may be happening?
As I mentioned, we're undergoing this Camp for Water process, this Climate Adaptation Master Plan for Water. And it is a comprehensive and holistic way of planning that integrates and refines some planning methodologies in a very timely way. So for example, we have a wonderful team in our water resource management that looks at our supplies for water at various watersheds and looks at our projected demands. We're going to continue to do that. I think we're going to be doing that on a more granular level because the climate is constantly changing. Populations are constantly moving. So a process that happened every 5 years is probably going to be refined to get more data updated more regularly.
Yeah.
In addition to that, it's going to be done in parallel with financial considerations and in parallel to some things that we just talked about in terms of equity and affordability considerations. And at the same time, we are constantly learning about the climate and more to the point, extremes in the climate. And so all of this is now being coordinated and refined in a lot faster so that we can, the term is adaptive management, so that we can make some decisions and adapt quickly.
And I just want to simplify that because, you know, this show is geared towards people who may not have a scientific background or a PhD. But with respect to the climate constantly changing, nothing is perfect. Science is all about learning from your mistakes, learning from the data, and modifying your hypothesis to something different, which is what Adrian was saying with that graph constantly changing. We know things are getting hotter. We know that there's less water. We are in and out of a drought. California has had 2 wet seasons in a row. That does not mean that we are out of a drought. It simply means that we've had an anomaly come through with a very wet 2 wet winters. But our extended future, long-term planning, we were going to have drier conditions and we need to plan accordingly, which is what Adrian and his group are doing to make sure that we meet those goals and constantly make those adjustments by collecting more and more information, more and more data to make those conclusions. So just kind of overly simplifying. Well, that's what my gift in life is, keeping it simple. So just keep, just to think about that long-term future, because we are talking 100 years from now. Where are we going to be?
Yes. And 100 years from now, it depends on what we do now.
Exactly.
What we are experiencing now is based on decisions that were made 20 or 30 years ago.
Exactly.
And we have to have that forward vision to adapt. I'll say one more thing that is not super obvious, but when we talk about climate change, a lot of times we talk about averages, average temperature, average precipitation. And two things that we should understand, particularly for Southern California, is that those averages are made up of extremes, right?
Mhm.
Extreme wets and extreme dries. And so not only do we have changes in the average temperature, but the extremes associated with them are increasing as well. And so that's one thing that we've have to learn to adapt to.
Yeah.
One extreme that we've experienced recently are atmospheric rivers. Those are becoming more and more extreme.
Could you
And this
explain what an
year,
atmospheric river is if people don't quite understand?
yeah, atmospheric river is essentially a weather pattern that brings a tremendous amount of water to a particular area, and so much water it's comparable to a river in the atmosphere. That's the term, atmospheric rivers. So those aren't new,
No,
had
just
them
massive
before.
flooding.
But what is different though is that historically you would get atmospheric rivers that would move. So they would come and they would go and you would get some water. And what's different now is that they're not moving as fast, that they're just staying.
They're
And
stuck.
so you get and understanding those is going to be critical to understanding how we adapt to this changing climate. Where in California we expect more, well, or less precipitation, but probably less precipitation, but certainly more rain, less snow. That's important. We will be
Yeah.
experiencing that going forward. And our system, which was designed for the 20th century, is designed for snow,
Yes, it is.
not designed for rain. And as we get more rain, we have to move more water faster and put it somewhere. That's the challenge. That's the challenge to avoid flooding and also to preserve that resource.
And to clarify, with the snowpack, the snow would just
Yeah,
stay put, slowly melt.
that's
We would
it.
capture that melt and use that water. But now we're dealing with an onslaught of fast water, more water now in these almost, catastrophic situations. And we need to be able to adapt to that. That's the
Yeah,
adaptation.
that's the adaptation. And to give you a figure, I think this last year, Southern California experienced 300-year storms in 2 months. So
Things are
that's
changing.
climate change. Yeah, that's climate change.
One of my old professors said the only consistency you can count on is change. So,
There you go.
so future planning, got to. The infrastructure needs to adapt. We need to adapt. Data is vital. I mean, data is king in this world. Getting as much of that in going forward. I know that you guys have a lot of interactive activities and events that
Yeah.
Metropolitan Water District does. Is there anything coming up that maybe someone could attend or get involved in?
Yeah. Two things, and this is timely because this is an environmental justice program. And so one of the key foundations for environmental justice is not only dealing with historical inequities, but also making sure that communities are engaged from the get-go in terms of the projects and infrastructures that are impacting their communities,
Yes.
whether it is in terms of how the systems are designed and frankly the techniques we learned from our Envision training, which is sustainability standards for infrastructure design, very similar to sustainability standards for building designs for leadership in energy and environmental design. This is Envision for infrastructure. Those guidelines call for community engagement. So for our current project, which is the largest planned recycled water project in the nation, it's called Pure Water Southern California. And when it's fully built out, if it's fully built out, it would be at 150 million gallons per day, largest in the nation. That's significant, taking place in Carson, and there's significant engagement with that community around how that project is being designed and and also in terms of workforce development opportunities. So there's pure water opportunities for the community to engage. And there's also our Camp for Water process, which I mentioned, this large-term planning. We have information and methodologies for engaging and learning more about that process.
And I don't think when you talk about the water recycling, I've been to that plant in Carson. It's quite remarkable. And most people, they go and you're just seeing a whole bunch of pipes and machinery.
Yeah.
So unless you're a nerd like I am, that you get really excited about that stuff, you're going to just see pipes and things. Yeah, I just personally, I love that stuff. But people are going to say, oh, it's just a bunch of pipes. This is taking, wastewater and recycling it to be pure and clean and drinkable or potable again. Yeah. And there's a lot that goes into that. I mean, it's not just sterilizing it and stripping everything out. There's actually smell and taste that has to be involved.
That's right.
And that's a whole process.
Yeah. And so the plant that you toured was our demonstration facility where we are going and refining all the techniques associated with that. The first thing to understand is in terms of recycled water, like all water is recycled. This is a finite planet.
It is a finite water. That is true.
So it's all being recycled. And what we're doing at these plants is just mirroring processes that go on in the environment, right? We typically use membranes in terms of these systems, coupled with reverse osmosis, and coupled again with advanced oxidation, including UV, to get the water as pure as you can. So pure, in fact, that we have to add things back in, minerals, for health and safety. So yeah, making sure all of that works is complicated, but actually that's not the biggest issue. Recycled water, that technology has been around. It's used in the space station. We don't send bottled water up there. So it's proven. We're just going above and beyond. We're looking at fail safes and making sure that, when things go wrong, that this doesn't go wrong, that we can always rely on that. So there's a bit of refinement there, and there's things to learn as we scale that process up.
Which is, and it's a big process. That's a huge undertaking, a necessary undertaking to get us to those next 100 years of advancement. Yeah. So if people wanted to find you, get engaged, you have a slide queued up.
I do. There you go.
And there it is.
Mm-hmm.
And Camp for Water, I love that.
That's our Climate Adaptation Master Plan for Water. Cute acronym. But that website would also get you on that same area connected to our pure water system if you'd like to learn more about the recycled water process, or figure out how we're engaged with the communities. That's all right there for you.
Which is guys, if you have the opportunity to go to the Metropolitan Water District, they have board meetings. It's open to the public. You can go. It is really fascinating to learn what is happening and how much is being done. It's very, you have to wrap your head around all the processes does take some time. So if you have a chance to reach out to Adrian or reaching out to the Metropolitan Water District, for people who are just listening, not seeing it, the website is MWDH2.com. And that way it takes you to their website. You can see all the upcoming events. Just go to their calendar. It's pretty fascinating. And I believe some of the water treatment plants may be now open to the public for tours. I went to one years ago before COVID. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I think you went along with some of our directors, which give tours. It is imperative that the public understands where their funding is going and why we're making those decisions. We're very cautious and careful on how those decisions are made, but we really want to be transparent. Yeah. So not only are our board meetings open to the public and broadcast, but through our directors, and whichever, there are 38 directors, and so there's one in your community if you're in Southern California. They work very hard to make sure that they hear from their constituents and they educate the constituents as well. So reach out.
Yeah, and just to continue on the theme of Metropolitan Water, really does make sure the water is clean. You guys have so many fail safes and so many tests. I went to the Laverne's facility, and just the laboratory alone of making sure that nothing goes wrong, and you have fail safes and fixers, and it's a intricate process. And I really want people to understand just how much goes into what you guys do on a daily basis. And go to their events, check them out. Just you know, Metropolitan Water District, Southern California, easy to find. So Adrian, is there a way for people to, if they want to get in touch with you directly through LinkedIn or through MWD.com, H2O.com, anything like that?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best. Just Adrian Hightower at LinkedIn. You'll find me there.
Perfect.
Yeah, and just one last thing you mentioned, because you brought up our water quality lab, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Very proud of it. And it is really kind of a distinct feature because, as you said, we care about our water, and we have high standards governed by the EPA, which is frankly a little stricter than the FDA, which governs your bottled water. We can talk about that at another episode.
But yeah, your bottled water is not as clean as what we're doing here.
We have higher standards, and that also means looking ahead to standards that are coming, or constituents that should be concerned about. So that's what our water quality lab does very well. They're looking ahead to make sure your water is safe.
Absolutely perfect. Adrian, thank you so much for your time. You are doing an amazing job. What you guys are doing to keeping us with water is important. I mean, we will die without it. Keeping it clean, keeping it healthy, very important. So thank you for everything you do. It's really remarkable work.
Yeah, me and the other 1,800 here for you 24/7.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a very large organization, folks. This is a large organization. It's an amazing group of people. So thank you for your time. You're doing great work, guys. Please check out Metropolitan Water District, Southern California. Go to their events. I highly recommend it. It's very educational and it's entertaining. It's fun. You'll like it.
I do.
Take care. Thank you, guys. I'm Wendy Nystrom, your host with Environmental Social Justice. We'll catch you next time. Adrian, again, thank you for your time. This is awesome.